What's up, everybody? AxeWizard here, looking on my game some more. Made quite a bit of progress on things. Sorry it's been so long since the last video. I've just been playing a lot of Vermintide 2. So, I came up with the name Neurality 3092. I was just going to call it Neurality, but there's like some AI group called Neurality already. So, I hope this isn't like a copyright thing, but I'm just thinking like the neural networks, like AI and stuff like that, except like it's like the new reality of the future. So, and then 3092 is just a number that sounded kind of cool. So that's what I'm going with for now. Working title. Looks a lot better than To Do. But, so let's jump in. So there's a few things you'll notice right away that are a little different. Mainly this ugly kind of panel on the right here. So, I've spent quite a bit of time generating AI art. So I have a working mini-map that you see that I'm going to maybe add a black outline around these markers. That way they're a little more noticeable, because you kind of really can't see them, but it works. It's a working mini-map, and I have this panel over here that I'm going to add a lot more stuff to, such as like, you know, player health bar, shield health bar, and just add the little details about like what weapons you have and stuff like that. I might make it a little more narrow so that way it's not as big. It seems pretty big to me. So, but I'll get into how I made that later. And then if we, I also greatly improved the sound issues. So there's still a little bit of audio clipping. I'll get into what I have to do to fix that, but I'm on the home stretch, so let's hit G to get it on. You can see my mini-map updates to show red markers. So we have bad guys chasing me, and the sounds aren't like overpoweringly bad. So that is a win in my book right now. Oh, I scraped the wrong way. Okay, I got a bunch of little guys chasing me. But so yeah, so mini-map, and then there's a whole bunch of tweaks I've done. It's just a lot of different things. For example, projectiles only hit enemies now, so they don't just hit the first ship that they encounter. I added that functionality I had in GameMaker to where projectiles only hit your enemies. So I got that working again too. But as of right now, oh god, this is bad. Oh, okay, those are all allies. Whew. So I'm going to work on adding like a little marker that kind of goes around the player ship that shows like where the enemies are. Because chances are you're probably not going to have like this many ships, like, you know, having a big combat that often. Oh god, I'm getting lit up. Let's see. So I'm going to add like little markers, basically kind of like these little red markers here. I'm going to add those like around the ship, pointing to like where hostile ships are. That way it's a lot easier to tell. And oh, another thing I added is that you can actually select ships. So I can't do anything with it yet, but I have the ability to click on a ship and select them, which is pretty cool. So once I work on the left UI, you'll be able to see details about your target that you have selected. So that's kind of cool. But right now it doesn't really do anything except put this fancy spinner marker thing on him, which I don't know if I'm going to like that or not. I mean, I like the idea of this spinner marker. I mean, it shows pretty clearly who you have selected. But I don't know if I'm going to keep it like that or not. But so, ooh, there's multiple ships there stacked on top of each other. That's dangerous. Oh, there's a big guy coming after me too. Yeah, I flew right into a missile and destroyed myself. So, so lots of things I've been doing. So let me zoom in even more on this thing here. So things I've done since last episode. It's been so long since last episode. I went on vacation, and then when I got back from vacation, I just wanted to chill and not do anything. So I've pretty much been doing that. So I gutted Audio Manager. So last episode, I had like this whole complex system to where my Audio Manager, whenever you want to play a sound, it would try to limit the number of sounds being played, and there was this whole complex queuing system, and then a bunch of little features thrown in to, like, you know, stop a previously playing sound from the same ship, and it ended up being super expensive to run because you're just constantly iterating through a bunch of arrays, like every step, and it was a bit cumbersome, and it didn't solve the issue I was trying to solve, which was the bad sound quality. So I just gutted that, and then I added sound groups to my audio manager, and I'll show that in a second. And then I refactored my ship and weapon classes to just use these special sound players, not the audio manager, because if I wanted to do it through the audio manager, it was just gonna be a lot more complexity. So let's jump into the audio manager. So you'll notice there's a lot less lines of code. Like there was like 400 lines of code or something like that before. I cut a bunch of that crap out. So the big thing I'm doing now is I have sound groups. So you'll notice I have like 5 different sounds for like this light cannon shot. And all I did was I just popped open Audacity, and then I would load the sound in, and then I would go up to effect, and I would add some stuff. Like I would change tempo, which would change the length of the sound without changing the pitch. And then so I would add some variation to the length. That way the sound waves aren't exactly the same. And then I would also add some things, like I would add slight amount of distortion. I'd add like a little bit of reverb. And I would just kind of tweak the sliders to just make slight variations to where it's still the same sound, but it's a different sound wave. So that way, you're not playing 600 of the same sounds, which was what was the root cause of my audio issue that I've been fighting with for many episodes. So I've done that. You'll notice some of these arrays don't have much in them. I still have to do that for a few sounds. I just wanted to get the big pain points out of the way, which were light cannons and then shield impacts. So you still heard some really bad sound quality, and that's because I haven't done ship impact yet. That's the next big one. But once I add some more variation and randomization to those, it should clear up that sound issue. So everything else is still the same, except I have some constants to just, this seems like a cumbersome way of doing it, but it's the way I've got it working now. I just have constants that are just strings, so that way I can sort of have some sort of type safety, I guess, to where I don't have to worry about like typos and things like that. So and let's see, so most everything is the same. I combined a lot of stuff in PlaySound, so I cleaned this up a lot because there was a lot of duplicated code. So I made PlaySound check to see like if we have global position passed in or not. If we don't, then we're just using a standard audio player. If we do, then we're using a positional audio player. So that's all I did there. PlaySound is, these are just the, I just did something that's weird. So PlaySound doesn't have the global position. It uses a standard sound player. I've already hashed that out before. Those haven't changed much. I added a function to choose a random sound from a group, and all this does is this just, takes, you feed in this constant of what sound you want. So say if I want a randomized light cannon sound, I pass that in. So I choose that sound, and it will choose a random sound from this array. And so I just have a match, which is the Godot version of a switch statement. And I'm just checking my constants, and I'm just choosing a sound from the array that I have associated with that constant. So it's probably a cleaner way that I can do that. Maybe I can leverage a dictionary. Maybe I can store the key as the constant and then just the array as the value for that. So I might refactor that to use that. That seems like it might be a little cleaner, but this is how I have it working right now as a proof of concept. So it's a bit dirty, but it works. So we're just choosing sound, and this underscore here denotes that it's an internal function. So if you look down here, this is just me going through, and I'm just determining if we even have any data in the array that we passed in. If not, we're just returning a blank string. So I'm doing randomize as well. And then we're just randomizing, we were just picking a random index from that array. So that's all we're doing there, and we're just returning that sound. So nothing really too complex there. That's mostly what I did for the audio manager. And then what I did was on my there's so much stuff I've done on my ship. I create a variable called weapon sound players. So rather than having the audio manager create an audio stream player every time I want to play a sound, for the high traffic sounds such as weapon shots and shield impacts and ship impacts, I'm just going to use a sound player on the ship itself. That way we're not having to do a bunch of looping through and logic like I was doing before to make sure we're not playing a sound twice and stuff like that. We just have one sound player for every type of sound. So what I do is I have weapon sound players. I have this dictionary of, well, nothing right now. But then if we go down here, looks like this is all old code that I can get rid of. Yeah, I can get rid of that. So, boom. So if we go down here to our, actually, no, right here. So you see it says will be set by the get weapons function. So if we click get weapons here, you can see I have this function here, which is where I'm basically going through and iterating all my children and finding out which ones are weapons. And then I'm appending those to my weapons. And then what I'm doing is I'm determining if we already have a... Let me back up a little. This is complicated. The weapons have a variable called fire sound group. So, for example, a light cannon weapon is going to use the fire sound group of light cannon, and that's what it's going to pick from the audio manager. So, that's what I called it. So, the key of the dictionary is just that variable, the fire sound group. So, light cannon. And then if we don't already have something in there, then we're going to add that there. So what we're doing is we're creating a sound player, an audio stream player 2D, so a positional sound player. And then we're setting it as a custom name. I don't think this matters at all, but I just did it for funsies. And I'm adding it to the dictionary, so I'm just setting that key as this sound player. And then I'm adding that sound player to my ship. And then I refactored the weapon in the fire weapon function. I added the sound player as an argument there. So the ship can tell the weapon what sound player to use when it fires the weapon. So here I'm getting a choose sound from group, and I'm just doing the fire sound group variable that I just talked about. And I'm just having the audio manager give me a random sound path. I'm loading that sound. I'm setting that to the stream. I'm setting the stream of the specified sound player. And I'm playing that sound, and then I'm randomizing the pitch scale. So we're getting, up to like right now currently 5 random sounds. We get a different one, and then we also randomize the pitch. And then because we're all using the same sound player, if my ship has 25 light cannons, it's only going to play one light cannon sound when it fires, which is perfectly fine, because if you play it 25 times like it was doing before, then you get that huge audio clipping issue where the levels are just peaking and it sounds terrible. So that's how I worked around that issue. I think it's a very ugly solution right now, so I might clean it up in the future, but it's working. Before, like initially, I just had every weapon have their own sound player, but then you have the issue of if you have 25 weapons, they're all playing the same sound 25 times at the same time, and no bueno. So if we just route those at the ship has a sound player for every type of high traffic sound we need, and we handle that. So on the ship itself, I don't think I did anything here. In the take damage function, another high traffic sound was the shield impact. So I added a sound player called Shield Sound Player to the ship, and I'm just doing the same thing. I'm setting the stream, I'm playing it, I'm randomizing the pitch a little bit, and yeah. And then I'm also using that same Shield Sound Player for ship impact, which you won't hear unless the shield's dead anyway, so I don't need a separate audio player for it. And we're just choosing a sound from that. So As I said, I'm still working on randomizing some of the sounds here. I was just doing it for a proof of concept, so the concept is working, so I'm going to continue with it. And I think once I add these variations in sounds, I think we're going to be good. So, cool stuff there. That's a lot right there. So, cool. I talked about all this stuff here. Let's knock this off the list. So, next thing I did is, and these are in no particular order. I worked on these a little bit at a time. So, sometimes I did the mini map, and I would do something else, and all sorts of different stuff. So there's no particular order, but I want to cover what I did. So I set main scene as the main scene again. So in the last episode, when I made my title screen, I had to set it as the main scene in the project. So if you go to project settings, and I believe it is run the main scene here, I had it set as the title screen. So, and the reason why I was doing that is because initially I had main as a type node 2D. And if you put a control node as a child of a node 2D, it doesn't want to work right. So I set main as a type node rather than node 2D. And then I was able to switch that back around and made it work. So on my title screen, if we go back to that, so UI title screen, we go to the script here. So on my new game button, rather than I'm just emitting a signal called new game, and I define that signal here, and then my main, I connected that signal and it made this auto-generated function here, which I should do just for completeness. There you go. And then I just put the code I wanted to execute here before, where I'm creating the parallax background that I created. I'm adding it to the scene, and then I'm setting up a canvas layer, which is something new that I had to do for the mini map. I'll get into that in a few. And then I'm adding like my UI, and then I'm executing my test ships function, which creates the player ship currently and also 50 other ships. So that's why I have a to-do here for instance player, set variables, and add it to scene, because I'm doing that in test ships right now. So there's a to-do to handle it. So yeah. So that's what I did there for that. So nothing really too big there. I also tweaked the title screen to use the audio manager. So if you go to the title screen here, I'm using Audio Manager to play the sounds, so that way when I run the game, you know, if I click a button, it actually plays that click sound, even though it deletes the title screen and then adds all the other stuff on the screen. So that's what I did there. So it works pretty well, pretty snazzy, cool stuff. Nothing too fancy there. So I talked about that stuff. Fantastic. So as you saw, I started on the UI. So if we go to right panel, you can see I've got a pretty basic thing going on here. So up at the top left here, I have a margin container, and I have this metal texture here, which I just AI art generated. So if we go to my AI art generation stuff, outputs, I generated a bunch of seamless textures so that they tile. So I have a bunch of, you know, metallic like textures here that I can use that were AI generated. This is the one I picked for that, but I might tweak it, pick a different one. I might have like a bunch of different ones for like if you're in like a different style of ship, you might have a different looking UI, which could be kind of cool. But that's what I've got right now. So I did those textures. I also did like some circuitry textures, like a motherboard that's also seamless. So these tile, this is the one I'm using for the background here. So I've got the metal texture here, and I have another margin container, and then I'm probably in the way, but I set over in theme overrides, I set the constants here to have like a 25 pixel margin. I might tweak this later, but it's working all right. And then I have another texture inside here, which is that circuitry texture that I added. Then I have a VBox container that's going to have all the different items in my UI. And then I have an aspect ratio container, because if I didn't have this, then my minimap like sprite would like take up the entire thing. So I wanted to keep that aspect ratio, since this is basically a square. I wanted to put that there. And this little minimap radar thing was more stuff that I generated from AI. So like I've got a ton of different ones that I've been generating. Some of them are not good, some of them are all right, but these were all like futuristic kind of, like this one's not bad, maybe I could use that one. But just a bunch of different stuff. So this one's pretty snazzy. I kind of like that one. That one's pretty cool too. So just a bunch of AI generated art for like I wanted like a little radar mini map kind of, and that kind of looks like it. I was using another one, but it was all square and it looked weird. So pretty cool stuff there. So let's talk about the mini map, because that's the only UI element that I really have on here. So mini map, actually made that a separate scene. So in the mini-map scene, there's not really much. I just have another margin container as the child, and then I just have the texture reticle, or not reticle, rectangle. I keep saying reticle, rectangle, for the actual texture that I'm using there. But the magic is in the code here. So let's go up to what I'm doing for this. So I kind of followed a tutorial for this. So if we go to there's a site called Kids Can Code, which is really cool. Let me turn this to not be dark mode, so that way it doesn't change colors and stuff like that. So this had like a cool little mini map radar section here, and I kind of saw what they were doing. So they're using like a 9-patch rectangle for their actual mini map and stuff like that, which is pretty cool. And then I kind of listened to what they were doing for adding map markers. And then I looked at what they were doing for theirs, and then I just did my own thing. So there's a few things I'm kind of using, like determining where to place the player marker in the center of it. But yeah, it's pretty cool. So this is pretty cool. So kidscancode.org, there's like a whole thing on Godot recipes. It has a bunch of stuff for 2D, 3D, so all sorts of different stuff. Pretty helpful stuff. So definitely check that out. Really handy. So let's get back to the code here. So what I did was I have 3 types of markers. I have a player marker sprite, an enemy marker sprite, and then the neutral marker sprite. So the player marker one's just green, the enemy one's red, and the neutral is gray right now. So I could probably just have one that's white and then use like some sort of color function, but I haven't messed with colors in Godot at all. I don't know how that works. So I just made 3 separate things and loaded them in for now. So then I have let me scoot this back over. There we go. So I have a variable to track the player marker. And this is set in ready. I could probably just do on ready, but whatever. And I have a dictionary that tracks all the other markers. And the dictionary, every key value pair, the value is another dictionary that holds the ship that the marker is representing, and then the actual marker that we are manipulating on the minimap. And then we're also keeping track of the player ship. So we got that. And then we're determining the map scale on the fly, but we're just declaring that variable here. So this is null at the start because I'm not assigning a variable to it. And then I have a maximum marker size because since the markers are AI generated as well, they came out as like 512 by 512 images, which looks comically huge if you don't resize those. So yeah, good stuff. So just for funsies, if we change this to 512 by 512 and we save it and we run it, this is what I was working with before I did the stuff. So yeah, obviously super handy minimap here, so much detail that you can clearly see. So I just scaled that down. There we go. Put that back to 24. So what are we doing here? So the map scale, I'm just basically taking the current rectangle size of the minimap that we have, and I'm dividing it by the viewport rectangle size. So we're just getting that scale that we need to. We're getting the scale of because otherwise, if we didn't have the scale calculated, you know, if I have a ship like right here, like say this little ship right here, if I didn't have that map scale, it would show as super far away on my mini map. But obviously on the mini map, you want it to be shown pretty close. So you can see here that shows that. So that it scales it down for the mini map. So that's what that is. So then I'm creating the player marker, which is a sprite. I'm setting the texture for the player marker, which is the player marker sprite texture that I got. And then I'm adding it to the scene. And then I'm setting the player marker position to be centered in the my rectangle, which is a perfect square. So it's going to center it right there. And then I'm scaling the marker sprite down to max size. So I'm getting the current size of that sprite, which is just the player marker.texture.getSize. So cool stuff there. Then I'm getting the scaling factor, which is how much we need to scale it. And I'm just doing the max marker size divided by the sprite size. And that gives me the scale factor we need to do. And I'm applying that scale factor to the scale property of the player marker. So cool stuff there. So now we go to the process function. So every time process fires, what we are doing is we are ensuring that we're tracking the player. If we don't have a player, we need to find it. So I'm just checking, is instance valid? Player ship. If not, find and set the player ship. So this function is a helper function that just gets all the ships from my ships group, and then it iterates through all the ships, and it just checks the player variable. And if it's true, then we have a player. If it's not, we don't have a player, continue on. If we do find a player, we assign player ship to be that ship. That's all we're doing there. So pretty cool, handy function there. So once we find the player ship, we are validating again, did we manage to find a player? If we do find a player, we're setting the player marker rotation to be the same rotation as the ship. If we don't find a player, we're doing nothing. We're just going to return. If we've managed to get past that, then what we're doing is we're doing update marker list and update marker positions. Now, this is kind of messy because I'm iterating over like arrays multiple times, and I could probably consolidate that, but I wanted to break out those operations separately. So let's take a look at update marker list here. So what this does is this marker list, again, we're storing that in a dictionary, or I like to think of it as a struct or an object in JavaScript. I'm iterating through all the markers that we have. So I'm doing a for loop. So I'm doing for key in other markers. And so that gives me all the keys of the dictionary. And then what I'm doing is I'm just saying, hey, is instance valid? Is this key, is this ship that we're tracking? Again, if we go up here to that expected shape of values, we're storing the ship and then the marker. So what we're doing is we're just verifying that the ship is still valid. If it is valid, then we're good to go. We don't need to update the marker list at all. If it's not valid, then what we're doing is we're actually going to delete the marker, and then we are going to erase this entry from our dictionary. We're just going to get rid of it. And then, oh, this is old code. I don't need that anymore. Save. I was using a while loop before I figured out I can just get key in a dictionary. So good stuff there. So once we do that there, we've done our cleanup task for update marker list. So now what we're doing is we want to see if we're missing any markers that we don't have. So for example, if a new ship comes in the zone, we want to make sure that we're tracking that. Now, realistically, I probably should be using like signals. So like whenever a ship enters the thing, it should just emit a signal, and I should somehow capture that signal. But I just don't understand signals that well. And every time I've tried to just connect signals on the fly, it doesn't work really well. And I haven't gotten it to work yet. So I'm doing it the messy way, where I'm just constantly checking. I'm polling to see if, we have anything that we're not, which is a bit more expensive. It would just be nicer if I could just, get the signal to work. Like a ship comes on and say, hey, add me to the mini map. And every time a ship dies, just emit another signal that says, hey, remove me from the mini map. But I haven't got it to work yet. So eventually, maybe one day. But for now, we're just constantly checking all the ships. So what we're doing is we're getting all the ships in the group ships. I'm iterating through those, and I'm making sure that we're not tracking the player, because we're already doing that. I mean, realistically, I probably could just move the player in the dictionary as well, and just keep it centered. But I'm just handling it separately, because that's how I've got it working right now. So I'm getting the instance ID and I'm converting it to a string. So the instance ID is what I'm using for the key in the dictionary. So again, dictionary just holds key value pairs. The key is just the instance ID. So I'm getting the ship instance ID and I'm casting it to a string, or converting it to a string. And then I'm just simply verifying, hey, is this already in my other markers list here? If it already exists, then just skip this iteration and move to the next ship. If it doesn't exist, that means that we're not tracking this ship yet. So we want to create a new marker for it, and then we're going to set it to use the neutral sprite marker by default. And then what we're going to do is we're going to ensure the player is valid. So we're always checking if player ship is still valid. If it is valid, then we're searching through the player ship's enemy list. And if this ship happens to be in that enemy list, then what we're going to do is we're going to set this marker to be enemy sprite. So I have a to-do here to determine if they are also allied with the player, because you'll notice that like when I run the game and I hit G, I have red markers. I don't have any other green markers for allies. So I can't shoot my allies. They're on my team. So I haven't got that. I haven't started on that yet. So I just threw a to-do on there. I'll tackle it later. But yeah. So then what I'm doing also is I'm scaling the marker down to max size. Same operation I did earlier for the player marker. And then once I have all that, let's see. So we made the marker. I'm adding it to our list here. So other markers, I'm setting I'm using this key, and I'm adding the ship and also the marker, so I can use both of those. Once I've got that saved, I'm adding the marker to the scene, and then so we have the marker created. So that's what update marker list does, and then we have the actual update marker positions functions, which is where I go through and I make sure that everything's placed on the mini-map correctly. So if we look at that, we're just iterating through all of our markers. So the first function was to just make sure that our list is correct. And then now that we have a correct list, we're going through and we're actually executing actions on that correct list. So I'm ensuring that both player and other ship exist. So if neither of these instances are valid, we're just returning, so it does nothing. If both of those are valid, then what we're doing is we're positioning it relative to our player ship, to the player ship, and it's also scaled. So we're calculating the marker position, which is a vector 2, and then what we're doing is we're doing the ship position subtracted by the player ship position, and then we're multiplying it by the map scale. And then because I don't have zoom working yet, I just added it at 0.5 zoom, which is what my camera uses when I'm maxed out all the way out. This is like max zoom. So if you look on the mini map, there should be a pretty close comparison to what you see. So you can see over here, now we've got our ships over here. It also like clamps it like in a circle, so you can see that they don't go in the corners here. So you can see all the ships piled up down there. But yeah, I might make a different marker if they're super far away. I just might make it a dot, but I haven't added that yet. It's something I've been thinking about. Once I get the markers looking how I want them to, I might add that functionality. But for now, this is where I'm making sure it doesn't exceed the bounds of the mini map. If I didn't have this here, then what would happen is it actually showed it on the mini map thing. If we go back to UI, radar, mini map radar, it showed it on here what would happen. So you see how the markers are basically off the mini map. So I'm just basically setting it so it can't exceed the bounds of the mini map, because that would just look ridiculous. So cool stuff there. So I'm calculating what the max magnitude is. I'm just since I'm working with a perfect square, I'm only calculating one dimension. I'm just using a float, since you can multiply a vector 2 by a float that acts as a scalar. I'm just doing it that way. So I'm just doing what our current rectangle size is divided by 2, and I'm subtracting 32 to give it some padding, some offset there. So that seems to be the sweet spot for this sprite that I'm using. So you can see, if I go all the way over here, you can see they're all piled up right here. There's like a 32 pixel gap here that seems to be pretty good. So I like how it looks, and you can see them kind of go around. Again, it's a circle, so pretty happy with how that looks and works. Cool stuff there. So if then we're just simply determining if the marker position length, which is the magnitude of the vector, is greater than our maximum magnitude. Then what we're doing is we're setting our marker position to be normalized, which just basically sets it to be a magnitude of 1, and then we're multiplying it by our max magnitude. So if our ship is 500, if the vector of the ship is like a magnitude of 500, which is greater than our maximum, then what we're doing is we're taking that vector, we're normalizing it, which sets the magnitude to 1, they're multiplying it by our maximum. So say if our maximum is like 100, then it would just make it 100. That's all it's doing there. So once we've got the marker position calculated, then we are setting, we're also adding the offset to make it centered, because in the game, it's calculating the position based off of the top left. So I'm just simply centering it and adding that offset there, so everything is centered around the player, rather than being all clustered up here. That would look really weird. So I'm centering that there. I'm just doing rectangle size divided by 2, the same calculation I did to center the player. And once I've got the marker position all calculated, I'm setting that position for my marker in my list. And then I'm also updating the rotation of the marker to match that of the ship. So that's why I'm storing both ship and marker, so I can constantly reference that stuff. And then I'm just checking if we need to update the marker to be an enemy marker. Again, this is something that would probably be better to be a signal, like if an enemy is if a new ship gets added to the player enemy list, then we could probably send I would imagine a signal, but I don't quite know how to connect it yet. So, and I've been looking at the documentation for signals and how to connect it and stuff like that. And it's not clicking with me yet. It's going to take time, but eventually I will get it. And then I'll probably have to go through and refactor all my code to just use signals to make it better, because that's what Godot wants you to do. So right now I'm sort of strong arming stuff to just make it work, and it's not ideal. But I'm making it work. So cool stuff. And then basically if we are on the player ship enemy list, and my texture doesn't equal the marker sprite, then I'm updating my marker sprite to be enemy marker sprite, the texture of my sprite. So yeah, that's how the minimap works, and it's took me a little bit of fiddling with it to get it to work how I want to, but I'm pretty happy with how it's working right now. It looks like a real minimap, and the cool thing is, like, I can make this pig full screen and it stays the right size, so pretty cool stuff there. So pretty happy with how the minimap turned out. I might tweak the actual sprites and stuff used. I'm definitely going to tweak the markers to make them more visible, but I might also change the background some more too. But there you go. So I started on the UI. I got a working minimap thrown together. Again, I might shrink down those sidebars so that they're not as big, because I'm also going to have one on the left side as well, and that's going to show details about your selected target. Speaking of selecting targets, I roughly added the ability to select a ship. So let's talk about that really quick. So if I click on a ship, you can see it's now selected, but I can't do anything with it right now. So I haven't got that far yet. I'm still working on, so like once I select it, I can like maybe right click it to like engage combat with it or something. I don't know quite how I want to handle that, but I think it's not unreasonable that if you select a ship and you shoot at it, you're probably intending to shoot that ship. I'm just saying. So, yeah, good stuff. So I'm still working at how I want to handle that. I'm thinking what I might do is, if you have a ship targeted and you shoot it, it doesn't actually go into combat with you until the projectile hits it, in which case you're both added to the enemy lists and then you throw down. So still working on how I want to handle that. I'm thinking that's how I'm going to go, but let's talk about the actual method I'm using to select stuff. So if we go to, I think it's other scenes, I have a mouse area 2D scene, which is just an area 2D that has like a 1 pixel collision shape. And what I did for this is I just basically, and this is super rough. I just did this today, so I'm not even quite happy with how this works yet, but let's just get into it. So I'm tracking the last selectable item that I hovered over. So in the mouse area 2D, there's different, if we go up to the node up here, and you click on this, you can see there's an area entered signal and a area exited signal. So this mouse area 2D, I'm constantly updating to equal the mouse position. So that's what I'm doing there. And we're just tracking like, hey, if we mouse over a ship, we want to make sure that it's the last selectable thing that we hovered over. That way, if we actually click, it just sets the last selectable hover that we had to be our selected. And then if we leave an area, we just clear out that last selectable hovered if it's the same that we already had pre-selected, I guess you can say. So then I have a selector sprite, which is that fancy circle spinning thing you see when I click a target. This is that sprite that I added there. It's kind of, I might change it to be white, or maybe change it to be white, and then maybe I can use some like Godot color stuff to, maybe if you select a friendly target, it's a green circle. Maybe if you select an enemy target, it's a red circle, and if you select a neutral target or something, it might be gray, or it might be yellow, or whatever. So just some ideas there. I'm gonna but I've got, for proof of concept, it's working. So then I have the selected sprite, which is the actual sprite object that I'm going to be managing. So that's all we're doing there. I'm not doing anything with ready right now. I could probably get rid of that, but I just have it there. So in the process event, I'm doing this update selected sprite position, and that's all I'm doing is I'm just updating the position of that little fancy spinner to be that of who we have selected. So I'm just ensuring, hey, is the instance valid? Is our selector sprite valid? Because if we don't have anything selected, we don't have the selected sprite showing. So if we don't have one showing, we have nothing to do here. So just return. And then the next thing we're doing is we're verifying if we still have a selected ship. So if we do have if nothing is selected, then delete the actual selected sprite. Just queue it or free it from the tree, and then we're just returning. If both those things are true, then we have a valid ship and sprite. We're going to update the position. So we're just updating the selected sprite global position to be that of who we have selected to be their global position. And then we're also rotating the sprite too for some flavor. So I'm basically rotating it 90 degrees every second. So it takes 4 seconds to do a full rotation, but that's all I'm doing there. So nothing too fancy there. So let's talk about the unhandled input event here. So when I was researching how I wanted to handle mouse input, one of the things that was recommended, I think it was in the documentation, if we click this, there was a input function, I believe. See if I can find it. Let's see, methods, input. Here we go. Let's see. So there's a little blurb here. If we can zoom in on this, it doesn't let me zoom in on the documentation. But it says for gameplay input, unhandled input and unhandled key input are usually a better fit as they allow the GUI to intercept events first. So that made sense to me. So that's why I went with the unhandled input there. So let's go back to where it was. Where was I? So I was just simply, were we trying to select something? So I have event is action release left click, which is just left click. And then as I'm saying, yes, do we have something that even can be selected? So I'm saying, hey, if instance is valid, last selectable hovered. Actually, let's back up. Let's go down here to these auto-generated functions from connecting signals. So on area entered, what I'm doing is I'm determining if the area that we entered is selectable. What that means currently right now, I only want to be able to select ships. But maybe in the future, I might want to select, you know, like wreckage or a planet or a space station. I almost said PlayStation. A space station. So I can add those in later, but for right now, I only want to worry about ships. So I'm just determining, hey, is the owner of the area, is this is it in the group ships? If it's not a ship, just return, do nothing. Next, I want to make sure that we don't select the player, because that would be really weird. Because you already have all your stats on the right panel, you don't need your stats on the left panel too, you greedy bastard. So I just made it, and just checking if we have the player variable set to true, it's a player ship, do nothing, just return. Otherwise, we have a selectable ship. Update our variable. So we're setting last selectable hovered, the last selectable ship that we hovered over, to be the owner of the area 2D. So if we go look at our ship scene, so let's say, boom, let's just look at ship 1. So you see we have an area 2D here. Since this is a scene, the owner is always going to be the owner of this the scene. So it's always going to be ship. So this is what I want to track. So that's why I'm doing that there. So cool stuff. Now on area exited, what I'm doing here is this the same one that we currently have selectable? So since you could probably hover over a bunch of ships clustered together, I wanted to make it so that it doesn't just clear out the last selectable if you leave a area, because you still might be on someone else. So I'm just saying, hey, if area owner is not the same as what we had in our currently last selectable hovered, the last one that we actually entered, then do nothing. We're not going to clear it out. If it is, however, then we want to just set this back to null, which is the desired zero value that I want there. It's the absence of a value. I want there to be no current selected thing. So that way, when I do my is instance valid stuff here, if it's null, that's gonna be false. So that's why I've got that there. So let's go back up to unhandled input here. So we're just checking if we have something that can be selected. So if this is set to null, it's not going to be valid. But if it is, then we're good to go. So what we can probably do here is I'm going to change this to not. And then I'm going to go here and say, no, just return early. That way it's not so indented. And then what we can do here is we can copy all this and then just de-indent it. Bam. There you go. So then, do we have something that can be selected? So yes, do we have any previously selected sprite? If we do, we're going to just get rid of that sprite. And then we're going to update our selected, our actual selected, to be the last selectable hovered ship that we hovered over. And then we're creating a new instance of our selector. So we're doing sprite new, and I'm setting the texture to be the selector sprite. And then I'm adding it to the root. I'm just adding it as a child. Initially, I was adding it just to the ships themselves. That way I wouldn't have to update the position. But what was happening is that sometimes the indicator would be like underneath other ships, and it looked really weird. So I always wanted to be on top, and without implementing some sort of fancy, system, just simply adding it to the root seems to work fine for my needs right now. So if that changes in the future, I can tweak that later, but right now it's working. So cool. And then what I have to do is I have to scale the sprite down. So if we run the game and we click on a small ship, you can see it's a pretty small sprite. If we click on a big one, it's a big sprite. So that's what we're doing there. So we're scaling it down because it would look really weird for this tiny ship to have this big targeting thing on it. It would look really goofy, and it did before I added this. So what we're doing is we're getting the ship size. So once we have this selected, I'm doing get node, and I'm just getting the sprite because every ship, if we go back to the scene, has a sprite, which is their ship sprite. So that's what I'm doing there. Doing get node sprite, and then I'm getting the texture of that sprite, and I'm getting the size of that texture, which returns a vector 2. So that's what I'm doing there. And then I'm resizing the sprite so it's proportional to the ship sprite. So the scale factor is going to be a vector 2. I'm just doing ship size divided by the selector sprite get size, and I'm doing this 0.6 because if you look at the sprite itself, let's just go back here again. I wanted to actually have the ship fit inside, so I wanted to say only about 60% of this sprite is really usable to be inside of it. So that's what I did there. And then what I did here is I wanted both the X and Y of the vector 2 to be 1-to-1, because what was happening is that it was actually giving me a oval, and when I tried to rotate the oval, it looked weird because, again, it's a vector 2. We're tracking X and Y. So I'm just simply setting them to be equal. So if the scale factor X is greater than the Y, then we're setting the Y to equal the X. Otherwise, we're setting the X to equal the Y. So we're just, if a sprite is, say, 128 by 64, I want my selector sprite to be, 128 by 128, or, whatever it would be. That's all I'm doing there. And I'm just applying that scale. So that's all we're doing there. And then once we've done all that stuff, I think I know why I didn't do the early return. because I need to also do this too. So this is where I'm setting my position of the Area 2D for my mouse. I'm doing that there. So let me undo this that I did, because there was a reason why I did that. Boom. There we go. Cool. Save. So that's how that works. That's, now, the thing I'm running into is I have this fancy thing that handles selecting, and then I have to, you know, somehow inform the player that, that I selected something. And I just haven't quite figured out how I want to do that yet. Obviously, signals come to mind, but because of how signals, I guess I don't know how signals work, but the thing I was told is that you want to, especially since I work with like React in JavaScript a lot, and you sort of pass properties down the tree, and then going back up the tree is very hard. So because this area, this mouse area 2D is somewhere up in the tree, it might not be in the same spot as the ship. I don't know if I should signal up to it, because I don't know if it's going to be up the tree. I don't know how that works. Just signals are just a big mystery to me that I don't quite understand. It's a big change from GameMaker to where I can just say, hey, get this instance ID, and then I can talk to that instance easily. It's a little bit different in Godot because it requires the paths of the scene tree, and it's a little bit more complex, but I think once I get signals down, it should be a lot easier. But whew, that's a lot. Holy cow, I've been talking for a while. So that's what I got there. Add the ability to select a ship, and then the last thing that I've done since the last episode is I made it so projectiles only hit enemies. So if we go to let's see, let's go to ship here. So when we go to do our, I think it's in our process function here. Yeah, so if we go to fire, we're doing weapon, fire weapon. Let's make this a multi-line here. That way it's more readable so we can see all the stuff that we are in fact doing. There we go. So what we're doing is we're including our enemies list, and then we're also including the sound player that we want the weapon to use. So we're including the enemies list. So when the weapon goes to actually shoot a projectile, we go to weapon here, and we go to fire weapon. You can see now we have that enemies array in here as well. What we're doing is we're just setting a enemies variable on the projectile to be enemies. And then when the projectile goes to hit, when it encounters that it entered another area 2D, what we're doing is if we I'm running out of steam here. It's after midnight here, so forgive me. But so we've collided with a ship, blah blah blah. Are we colliding with an enemy? So if the owner of the area that we're colliding with, we already covered that, is not in the enemies list, then it's not an enemy. Ignore it for now. So I might tweak this to, again, I was talking about earlier, I might tweak this to allow the selected ship to be shot at, you know, and it could collide with it, but that's something I'm gonna tackle after I sleep. So that's really all I did there. It's a bit convoluted right now. I think I'm so far deep in these patterns now that I've been trying to do things in probably a not very Godot way. That's starting to get pretty complex, but it's working, and because I'm commenting my code, I'm understanding, you know, what I was trying to do. Even if I take like 2 weeks away, I can come back to my code and clearly see what I was trying to accomplish. So comment your code. That's the best thing you can do as a developer, is to put comments in your code. I am so sick of seeing all these, you know, cool examples, and none of this code has any comments on it. None of it. And every video that you watch for stuff, no one's using comments, and I just don't get it. It's especially if you get a job as a developer in the real world, commenting code is going to make you, it's going to make you a lot easier to work with as a developer, especially if you know, if you get more people on your team and they're working on one of your old projects, you don't have to babysit them and hold their hand to see what the code is doing, because, you know, you're always constantly improving as a developer. So the code that you wrote 3 years ago is not going to be the code that you'll be writing today. It's going to be a lot worse. So if you just comment what your thought process, at the very least, comment what you're trying to accomplish with your code. Even though the comments seem kind of redundant, like, you know, I'm going through, oh, we're colliding with ourselves, do nothing, and just return. These provide a lot of context for people who are not familiar with your code. So just, I would rather have too many comments than no comments at all. Because, yes, you could go through here and see logically what each code block is doing, but it's also important to see what you were trying to accomplish when you wrote the code. Because when it comes, especially in a development cycle, if you're ever fortunate enough to come back and optimize a project, in the business world that doesn't happen very often, because most companies are, you know, just pushing out new stuff, and, you know, you rarely have any time to go back and optimize things. So you're constantly accruing what's called technical debt, which is stuff you have to go back and fix later when it finally breaks. But especially for, like, if you're hobby projects and games, when it comes time for me to come back here and optimize this game. So say I get my game working and it's working, but I want to make it work better. I can come back and optimize things, and hopefully by that point I'll be a better developer and I can see what I'm trying to accomplish here. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do this in, you know, 2 lines of code that only takes a few nanoseconds to accomplish, as opposed to a few milliseconds. So you can optimize your game to run better. Comments in your code are very, very important. So I'll get off my high horse for that. That's all I've got for you today. Again, I'm sorry that it took so long for this to come out. I've been on vacation, and then I've just been chilling at home, baby, just playing video games, not a care in the world. And then recently I started jumping back into my game here, and I'm having a blast with it. I really am. I'm stoked I got my mini-map to work. I just dodged a missile like an absolute boss. Yeah, my sounds are sounding better, so I'm getting closer to tackling that. Things are happening now. So I'm pretty happy with that. There is still a ship over there that is derping out, though. I want to go check that out. Without being murdered in the process. I think he's already dead. Never mind. I'm being lit up. But yeah. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you in whatever video I make next.